Hi, everybody. My name's Ari, and I'm really excited to be here to tell you today about some new updates to shortcuts in iOS 13. In iOS 12, we extended SiriKit by introducing the Shortcuts APIs, which let you expose actions from your apps to Siri. Shortcut actions exposed from your apps can be used in 3 different ways. They can be used as suggestions, they can be used through voice, and they can be used as part of multi-step shortcuts. Now, with suggestions, Siri will suggest your shortcuts to the user at just the right time, in search and on the lock screen, to accelerate things that they do with your apps every day. With voice, customers can use any capability of your apps just by asking Siri. This is really powerful because Shortcuts makes it super easy to voice enable your app, which lets people use your app in totally new ways, whether they're on the go with AirPods, in the car with CarPlay, or at home with HomePod, or just from across the room with Hey Siri. Lastly, users can build their own shortcuts in the Shortcuts app, which include multiple actions, including those from your apps. Now, this year, we're taking Shortcuts APIs even further, and we have some really exciting API updates to share that take voice and multi-step shortcuts to the next level. So let's dive into what's new. In iOS 13, the Shortcuts app is redesigned, and it's built into iOS, so it's easier than ever for people to discover and use shortcuts. Now, after we announced Shortcuts last year, the biggest request we heard from developers was to add parameters. So we're really excited to share that in iOS 13, we're introducing support for parameters, and it enables something that we call conversational shortcuts. This basically allows users to have a conversation with your app, and you control the conversation. So you can prompt the user for information you need and respond dynamically based on the user's input and their current context. This opens up really totally new use cases for what people can do with Siri and apps, and I'm excited to tell you more about it in just a second. But next, we're adding new ways for users to customize your shortcut actions through a new customization UI that acts on the same parameters as the ones that you define for the voice interaction. You can also enable advanced scenarios like outputs and variables. Lastly, we have an updated Add to Siri UI, which makes it easy for people to get started with shortcuts inside of your app. So let's take a look at what some of these new capabilities mean for the voice experience inside of Siri. I have a great new Siri shortcut. It's called Add to Instacart, and it adds items to my cart. So with conversational shortcuts, when I say Add to Instacart, Instacart can ask what I want to add with custom dialogue. And I'll say bananas. So there are a few different options for bananas. Instacart will ask which specific one I want by showing a disambiguation. I'll say I want the organic bananas. So if it's contextually appropriate, the app can ask additional questions based on what I've said so far. In this case, Instacart will ask how many bananas I want, and I'll say 6. Lastly, Siri can let me know that the task is complete with custom dialogue and custom visuals from Instacart. I also have another new shortcut. It's from the MLB At Bat app, and it means that I can just say, "Hey Siri, watch baseball," and it will jump me right into my favorite team's games. So the Phillies aren't actually playing right now, but with conversational shortcuts, the MLB app can detect that and recover appropriately, letting me know that there isn't a game on right now, but giving me some other options of things I might want to watch instead. So that's just a glimpse of what you can do in Siri, and in a minute we'll dive into the implementation. But first, let's talk about some updates to the Shortcuts app in iOS 13. The Shortcuts app is now built into iOS, and you don't need to download it from the App Store. It's the one place where users can manage all of their shortcuts. So everything that used to be in settings is now here also. In the My Shortcuts tab, the user can see all of the shortcuts they have set up, and they can run them just by tapping on them or by saying the name to Siri. And there's no need to record a phrase first. In iOS 13, we also have a brand new automation tab where people can set up shortcuts that show up or even run automatically based on certain criteria, like when they arrive at a particular location, when they get in the car, or when their alarm goes off in the morning. So we all know shortcuts is really useful, but it can be hard to start from a blank slate. So users can find hundreds of pre-built shortcuts to get started with in the Gallery tab. And this year, we're updating the gallery with a new section called Shortcuts from Your Apps, which this section highlights relevant actions from third-party apps, which includes your apps. So this is a really great opportunity to get your app's actions in front of the user, even when they're not using your app. The shortcut editor has been updated also with a new natural language format. Here's what it looks like in the editor when the user sets up a shortcut with the Soup Chef app. Note how my app has exposed this description, order 1 clam chowder, and the user can tweak those parameters at any time just by tapping on one of the buttons, like tapping on 1 or clam chowder. The editor also has a new action pane, which features actions from third-party apps that you can drag or tap to add to your shortcut. Lastly, your app's actions can now provide outputs, which means they can be hooked up to other actions to create even more powerful shortcuts. For example, the Soup Chef app can share an ETA, so you can add it to an add new reminder action to make a shortcut that adds a reminder to pick up your soup exactly when it's ready. So that's what's new in the Shortcuts app. But we also have some updates to add to Siri. Now, traditionally, voice functionality can be hard for users to discover because they don't know which features of your app are available or what to say in order to use them. Add to Siri makes this easy because people are already using your app. So you can add the Add to Siri button in the relevant parts of your app and that the user actually wants to use with their voice. In iOS 13, we've redesigned the Add to Siri sheet. The new UI lets the user set up shortcuts without having to record a phrase. They can just type a phrase, or they can accept one that's suggested by you. Afterwards, saying the phrase to Siri will run the shortcut. And if you tap on the action under Do, the user can tweak the behavior of the shortcut just like they can from inside of the Shortcuts app. Now, let's dive into the implementation. First, we're going to talk about how to enable your shortcuts to be customized by the user. And then we'll cover parameter resolution and how to use it to implement a great voice experience. Then we'll talk about how to deal with parameters that have dependencies on each other. And lastly, we'll cover how dynamic options and outputs can help take your actions to the next level in the shortcut editor. So let's start by enabling shortcut customization for an app that I've been developing. I'm really into soup, and so I've been working on an app called Soup Chef, which lets people order soups from their favorite restaurants. I want to enable shortcuts that let the user order a soup and choose how many soups they want right from inside of the action. So in order to set this up, let's start in the intent editor in Xcode. As you know, an intent is a specification of a task that the user can complete in your app. In this case, ordering soup. You should define parameters for every piece of information that you need from the user in order to complete that task. The set of parameters that you define here is used for both the set of questions that Siri will ask in conversational shortcuts, as well as the set of parameters that you can edit in the Shortcuts editor. For each parameter that you add to your intent, you can choose from the list of supported types that are provided by the system. Or you can create an enum, or you can even, in iOS 13, make your own custom types. Once you pick a type, you'll see some additional settings that let you customize that parameter, which are specific to that type. For example, if I pick string, I'll see some new options for capitalization and autocorrect behavior. For this parameter, I'm going to choose a soup enum type that I already created. Now, since I'm updating an existing parameter, I need to check the user-facing checkbox so that this parameter can be exposed to Siri and the Shortcuts app. For new parameters that I add, this will be checked by default. Next, I'll need to fill in some new information for my parameter. I'm going to add this display name, because that's used to show the parameter inside of the shortcut editor. Then, because this is an existing intent, I also need to check the intent is user configurable checkbox, which makes the intent as a whole available to both Siri and the Shortcuts app. Now, lastly, I need to fill in a parameter summary. I want to include the parameters quantity and soup in the parameter summary so that they're really easy for the user to tweak in the shortcut editor. So I'll add a string order quantity soup